my baby stays, have you hugged your piano today? The theme from Theatre of Blood. The composer is the tail end Charlie. You know, we come in to clear up the mess and to fix what other people have not been able to fix. I mean, every director's come to me and said, okay, Michael, you know, I didn't put enough emotion into it, or I didn't put enough warmth into it, or I didn't put enough action into it, right? So you're going to fix it, aren't you, Michael? You're going to fix it, right? You know, and yeah, sure, right? You know, and then they go and bury the music under the sound effects and bury the music under the dialogue. Well, it was 1972, 1973, and my agent rang me up and said she had this horror film that I really had to do. And I said, I don't want to do a horror film, right? And the second film I'd ever been offered, actually, was a Hammer film. Because my first film was A Mad Woman of Chaillot. And a few days after The Mad Woman of Chaillot, I got offered to do this piano concerto for Hammer, who was the horror company in England at that time. And I decided not to do that. And then I did Julius Caesar, and then I did a fabulous picture with Orson Welles called Upon This Rock, which was a dramatized documentary of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Orson Welles, Dirk Bogarde, Ralph Richardson, Edith Evans, and, you know, so I mean, I've already done some really biggies, you know. And so when they offered me this, and I turned it down, but they were like persistent. They said, no, 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 you're the guy for this, right? And then they changed it from being a horror to a black comedy. And that made a big difference to me. I could accept a black comedy. And I do think what it is a black comedy. I've never regarded it as a horror film, right? You know, so I went to see it, and I thought it was a great premise, right? And I fell in love with it. And Dougie Hickox, who was the director, was one of the most gracious men, I mean, I've ever met. And he had a great sense of humor. And we took tracks from Julius Caesar, and we took tracks from Upon This Rock, this great epic I had done in Rome, and essentially tempt Theatre of Blood, not like other composers go through the horror of directors tempting their movies with other people's music and then expect you to come in to emulate it or whatever, right? You know, I mean, that is the pits. But we tried my own tracks up against it. You know, we tried this, and we tried that, until we found, and Dougie and I both agreed on this idea of counterpoint, right? You know, so that, you know, if the film is doing one thing, right, you really don't have to complement that. You know, it's happening, right? So do something else. The perfect example of that was Cymbeline, right? When you know, the guy was in bed, right? Arthur Lowe, right? He was in bed, right? And Vincent and Diana are there, and they're going to saw off his head, right? You know, so the beginning of that sequence had all the grunts and the groans and the screams that you need in, you know, in black comedy music. And then, but once the actual operation started, right, Dougie said, you know, we don't want to do that, Michael. We don't want to do that. And I go, no, of course not, Dougie, right? You know, and you know, I'm always for, you know, going out on a limb, right? You know, and at that time, or just before that time, Dr. Kildare. It was an American TV medical series. Richard Chamberlain was Dr. Kildare, right? And I seem to remember that the title music to Dr. Kildare was this sort of slushy sort of string thing, you know, right? So Dougie tied the medical aspect of sawing off Arthur Lowe's head, right, to a medical situation because they were all dressed up in garb, right? And so we decided that we would use this highly romantic Dr. Kildare type approach to it, right? And that's what we did, right? And it took a lot of guts for Dougie to say, you know, let's go this way, right? You know, and as long as I've got my director behind me, I mean, I can do anything I want, right? You know, but he's the one who's got to carry the can at the end of the day, right? And I've never met anybody since then. Brian Forbes was my first director. He was like that. He would say, "What do you want to do, Michael? What do you want to do? Right? You know, go for it, man. Go for it, right? You know." And Dougie was like that. And today people they haven't got the guts to do that anymore. You know, you got to set the tone, right? I mean, you have to give it that Elizabeth, a little bit, a hint. You don't want to go overboard with it, right? But you want to hint, right? And the opening of the Mad Woman of Chaillot, I used a man called Hugo de Alton. He was the mandolin player in London at that time. And the opening of the Mad Woman of Chaillot, I'd had Hugo de Alton play this theme, like the mandolin, right? So I thought it would be nice to use the harpsichords in Theatre Blood as, you know, that period flavor, right? But then I thought that was a bit obvious, right? So I went back to the thought of the mandolin, but not using a tremolando, like I did in the Mad Woman of Chaillot, right? Just to use it straight notes, right? Ding, 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 dang, 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 dang. And with that silent movie look behind it, right? You know, I mean, it worked great. And then the strings come in and you build it, right? But, you know, once you've set the tone, right, you know, 16 bars of the tune, whatever it is, 8 bars of the tune, whatever it is, then it's time to move on and, you know, embellish it and become more movie-esque. So this is the original manuscript of Theatre of Blood. And if you look at the Blu-ray and you listen to the opening music, what you hear is what you see. Now, no one has ever had the privilege of having this before. Seeing and hearing. And so the mandolin goes. And the flute goes. There's the flute look. There's the bass. The flute, or the recorder actually. The violins go. So I used the recorder rather than the flute because it was more in character with the Elizabethan feel of the film. We're the tail end Charlies, you know, and we don't come along really until the film has been cut and the actors have gone 3, 4, 5 months before then. Right? But I went down to, it was West London somewhere, that old theatre, right? And the day they were burning the damn thing, right, you know, and I had this long chat with Vincent when he was up on the roof, right? And I think we talked about cooking all afternoon, right? And he would run off and do a take and come back and talk about cooking, right? Because he was a great cook. And of course he met Coral Brown on the movie, right? And they got married and lived happily ever after, right? But everybody liked him. Everybody liked him. Lovely man. Everybody on that film was lovely. Two themes in Theatre Blood is diddle da 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 da, and which is the opening, the title music, right? And then Cymbeline, which we're talking about, dee da 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 da. And I was also working with Anthony Burgess, or I had worked with Anthony Burgess. I had done Cyrano in New York on Broadway with Christopher Plummer, and Anthony Burgess had done the lyrics and the book, right? And Burgess and I got on really well, right? We were great drinkers in those days. Don't drink anymore, but we were great drinkers in those days. And so when I went on to do Theatre of Blood, I rang him up and I said, how about putting words, because he was a great Shakespearean, he was a great authority on Shakespeare, right? You know, genuine authority, as well as Joyce, right? Anyway, and I said, you know, why didn't you write some words to these two tunes, right? And I'll see if I can get Diana Rigg to record them. And he liked that idea, right? So he wrote these lyrics for each of the tunes, right? And I got Diana Rigg and I rehearsed her, right? And I always remember she turning up at my house in Muswell Hill in North London, and she was driving a Range Rover. For some reason, I didn't expect Diana Rigg to be driving a Range Rover, right? And she got out, and she was taller than I was. You know, it's somewhat intimidating. You know? She sang the songs really sexily, really sexily, and we recorded them with full orchestra. But for some reason or other, they were never released, which is a great shame. But I've got them. I've got them here, right? 95% of the movie was classically orientated, right? You know, except when Diana Rigg walks to that cafe, right, to meet Harry Andrews, and it becomes sexy, right? That flugelhorn solo. Wild stuff, man, wild stuff.
Your secretary told me I might find you here.
Really? It was terribly considerate of her.
After Theatre Blood, I went on to do like The Medusa Touch, which was another horror film, and another film called The Unseen with Barbara Bach. You know, I seem to ended up doing all these horror films, right, you know, and the films of great beauty, of great lyricism, right, like Upon This Rock, totally forgotten, totally discarded. No one wants to talk about it, right, you know. But the black comedies, right, horror, black comedies, horror, everybody wants to know about it.
Perhaps a similar adjustment will rectify your critical faculties.
This is Edwina's theme from Theatre of Blood. Perfect music for cutting off your head, baby.
Lowe's head goes rolling off the bed and falls on the floor.